Hello, my name is Adam Wingard. I'm the director of this motion picture, and this is.
Hi, I'm Tom Hammock. I'm the production designer.
I'm Alessandro Ongaro, the visual effects supervisor.
I'm Josh Schaefer. I'm the editor.
And you're also, Alessandro, you're also the second unit director?
Unit director,
Yeah,
yes.
You can't forget that.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you.
You got in the union for this movie and everything.
Can't complain.
So just starting right out the gate here, a couple things. Like in the original version of the script, there's actually a lot more detail going into what's going on in this shot, which it actually explains how like the crystals are heated by the sun, and that's what makes them glow. And there's actually supposed to be a daytime, nighttime in Hollow Earth, but we don't really get into it very specifically in this film, but that's sort of the idea. And the reason we actually started the film with shots of these crystals glowing was it was actually kind of in response to when GVK came out. Elon Musk had tweeted about the movie, and I think he said he called it amazeballs or something like that. And one of his tweets, though, he was questioning where the light in Hollow Earth came from. So we wanted to get that out of the way right up front. And truthfully, there's a lot of debate on how the light really did work in GVK, and we felt like it was a crystal kind of situation. In this film, we were able to really explore that and get into it.
And initially, when we were designing all the environments, starting from this one and then the one that we're going to see later, we wanted to emphasize a little bit more the crystals. And then little by little, we start kind of forgetting about it and say, you don't really need to.
Yeah, and the crystals, it does take you out of the sort of reality. So it's always like trying to find that balance of making Hollow Earth feel grounded and then throwing in these fantastic elements in there. Real quick, I just want to back up to the song. That was Jim Reeves' "Welcome to My World," and that track made it all the way through the previs. It was like the very first thing we put in, and and the reason I even know about that track is because of the Elvis Presley version that he did. And I would have used the Elvis version in this movie, but he only recorded it live. And so this version just had a much more polished kind of vibe to it. And that's why we ended up going.
Yeah, and then speaking of previews, since you brought them up, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Third Floor because they really did an amazing job on this movie. And the first scene actually that we worked on when I started on the project was this one, and that was a little bit longer than 2 years ago. And this didn't really change much from the very first version that we presented, right, Adam?
Yeah, if you go side by side on it, it's pretty similar. This was a little bloodier and longer. This was a bit more gratuitous and a little more guts and stuff, but pretty much the same.
Of this part of the movie.
Yeah, and the wart dogs, it's funny because as this movie progressed, we just kept making them uglier and uglier to the point where in the final version, that close up of them, they really look almost like zombie dogs. But that was so that they really felt gross and disgusting.
And then, remember, at one point we pushed them a little bit too far as far as visual effects. They were so point, disgusting.
Yeah, they got so nasty that it was like, I don't like looking at that, Alessandro. Can we not? You had foam coming out of their mouth.
And there was another thing I want to mention about this whole scene, all this environment that are made, of course, digitally. They're all inspired and using pieces that we shot in Iceland. Tom and I went early on scouting. We picked beautiful location, and I went back later on and we shot all this place from the helicopter. And
there's Doug.
There's Doug, our favorite.
And Doug was, Doug had one shot in the last movie and was such a fan favorite online. Everybody gave him they would call him Titanus Doug, and ended up sticking. And so we had to get his cameo in this film. I wish we almost had another shot of him later on in the movie, but it was a little too fan servicey. We had to cut it, but he gets his day in the sun there.
I love the Kong's cave, which is a throwback to the 1933 King Kong. So it's just nice to reference the original movie.
Little trees.
The landscape, as Alessandro was saying, is this kind of unique combination of Northern Australia, Papua New Guinea rainforest mixed with Icelandic landscapes, which just create this really unique world.
Yeah, and this whole opening sequence, this was part of my original pitch to Legendary. You know, like I had a couple sequences that I knew I wanted. I knew I wanted to open the movie with this kind of statement piece, you know, with Kong and no humans, no dialogue. I wanted it to be, you know, the movie to right out the gate say, this is the POV of the film. It's the monsters, and the movie's not going to have to rely on a outside narrator. And
some of this is, of all the movies in the monsterverse, this is the only kind of title sequence that was scripted in some way. All the stuff with Rebecca and Brian and everything was scripted, you know, and changed 100 times, but there was actually content that was story driven in the title.
Yeah, because the last film we had in GVK, we played a lot. Oh, real quick, I just want to mention, I used to work with a group called Racer Trash online. We do these remixes of videos, and a lot of these sort of effects were Racer Trash sort of inspired.
The Picture Mill did a lot of the color stuff too, right? The color direction.
That's right.
Rome, yeah.
Who shot that?
It was myself, and Tom was with me.
I didn't get to go to Rome. I was busy at the office with Josh. We were in Burbank.
Yes. Yeah, it was hard. You know, it was the food was so bad in Rome, and
I like that construction worker. He's just like standing there.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
It's like did he not see the huge spider?
it's the usual when the scene that there was someone that doesn't respond well to the
detection.
yeah.
It was a challenge, though, a little bit to try and integrate the action of a big Godzilla moment in a title sequence, but then also have it not be the title sequence, so that like right here we kind of can let the fight play out, because we don't want to.
I just like how like Godzilla literally crushes him like he's a really big bug. He literally stomps him, and this was something I was very excited to be doing, is having a giant bug explode right before the credits. I mean, that kind of tells you what movie you're watching right out the gate, you know? Like, there's no question at this point, after the opening in this sequence, what you're getting into.
Totally. It is fun that the very opening in Rome was the very last thing we shot, and then the very first stuff we shot is actually what we'll get to the end.
I was not there because I had COVID, but we'll get into that later. Oh, wait, real quick. Yeah, this is the big moment. That's my cat, Mischief. And I can't believe she made it through all the cuts of this movie, but she's in it. And the reason her picture is there is because she was the inspiration for this shot of Godzilla curled up in the Coliseum. She's right there in the foreground, too, looking at you on that Polaroid. She's all over this sequence, by the way. But early on in post-production, Tom was over at my house, and we were trying to figure out where to have Godzilla hibernate in the movie. And there was my cat, Mischief, in her cat nest, curled up. And we thought, how great would that be to have Godzilla kind of imitate that? And Mischief's been a big inspiration for me with, Godzilla, even on the last movie, which I've talked about. And it's really funny because just recently there's an article that came out with the Godzilla -1 director, where he was mentioning that his cat was also his big Godzilla inspiration. So go cats. This was one of the scenes we probably spent the most editing, weirdly. You wouldn't know it from watching it.
Story reasons, mostly.
We kept jamming.
I really liked the day players from Australia, by the way, in that scene. I thought they were all good. It was really just about getting the information across, the signal, as opposed to what else is going on in the movie.
Military, Rome would be flattened if it weren't for Godzilla.
This was one of our favorite shooting locations, and it's actually a groundwater filtration and injection plant that was mothballed in Australia because they were in floods. And we built this huge raised steel platform in the middle of this filtration system to have our set, so it just gives it so much depth.
Well, this is one of the really smart things that Tom does as a production designer, is that he, instead of like building, an elaborate set on a stage, which you can only make so big, and we only have so many resources on a film like this that have to go to Alessandro and his team to do all the special effects. we try to do things like that, like, build a small little set in a pre-existing place and then zhuzh it up with lighting and background things. And I love the way that turned out. Like, Ben Saracen did a great job on that set. It's probably my favorite looking set in this film. Especially because the lighting, it looks almost like a G.I. Joe, like the toy kind of set.
Gia.
Your daughter is intelligent. She's not engaged. Her grades are slipping. She's not interacting with any of her friends. And these problems aren't going away, Doctor.
Took so long to clean all the little bits of feathers out of that classroom. That's what's floating in the air.
Yeah, those are all real. And so every take we would do, they would have to blow in, thousands of feathers. And then Tom's poor team had to
They got
wrap them up
everywhere.
But people probably don't realize that kind of stuff is practical.
I didn't even realize it. It was an easy scene to cut.
Yeah, you didn't have to sit through all the sweeping and the half comatose director. This scene was funny because right here, if you look, I mean, we're shooting this kind of midday, but that wasn't the intention. We were originally going to be shooting this more with this morning light. But the ferry that was bringing up all the extras, all the kids you see in the background, it got delayed.
Come on.
For centuries, the Inuit tribe were the guardians of Skull Island, the ancestral home.
That is an amazing location. It's this incredible, brutalist concrete house up in Daintree, up by Papua New Guinea in Australia. And then this is actually an interior set on stage.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that Daintree set, I guess, in the next couple scenes. This was actually a longer sequence originally, right, Josh?
Gia used to come out when she was watching the documentary. Gia used to come out and they used to have a moment, but in an effort to sort of get the movie moving a little bit. And it was sort of the same tone of what you get in the tent.
Yeah, and it almost like had too much catharsis to it because they kind of hugged and there was this sweet moment, but it was actually a really good little scene. But yeah, we had to cut it because it just thematically, it took away from the tent scene, which was the most important. So we went with that.
The tent scene, I was going to say, is interesting because, we debated the tent scene a little bit, but it became such an important component to the movie because this is sort of what launches Andrews' journey through the rest of the movie. She's trying to find it's a personal journey. It's not a journey to, figure out what the signal is. It's about figuring out her daughter. And without this scene, it was a challenge.
Yeah, and like it's funny because this was a scene that was added pretty late in the game, in the script, and my emphasis was always on keeping the movie moving fast and sticking with the monsters. I mean, I just know the pacing that ultimately we're going to want to end up with. And so I thought, is this going to slow the movie down too much, this whole little section here? But ultimately, like Josh said, once we shot it, the performances were so good with Kaylee and Rebecca, and it really set up the movie. We actually tried a version at one point where we cut it out.
By the way, I love the music in the scene. By the way, this is this 80s sort of, vibe that I think really, gives Bernie a tone.
Yeah, Tom did a good job. Tom Hulkenberg, the composer, he did a great job with kind of Bernie's theme throughout the movie, getting that sort of synthwave inspiration in there.
This is a favorite set out here. This is actually an office building, and we love the idea that Bernie is maybe renting, maybe squatting in an office building.
Well, and for some reason, Bernie always lives next to a Chinese restaurant, like in the last film he did too.
So this is all entirely built and added. Normally it was just like a white snowboarding company office, but we made it into this crazy Chinese restaurant.
Am I right? Am I right, Adam? You painted your home office to be the same color as this.
I did actually. Yeah, I was so inspired by Bernie's apartment with the red and black interior that my office at home is also painted that way, and it's probably because I'm a little bit like Bernie in a way. I'm kind of a conspiracy guy, and not in a bad way, but that's kind of a negative thing now. But and I didn't actually think about this till later, but it's funny because I used to always do a little line in my hair like Brian's doing in this. Like that's how I had it in GVK. I used to always have a little line. And Brian requested that he do a little line in his hair. And I didn't actually think about it until after the movie. I was like, is he doing that as like a, like, is he saying that I'm like Bernie sort of? This take right here where Brian's going this close up, this one specifically, it's almost every part of this scene is from this one take we did here, and it's probably the best take I've ever done with any actor, like a full 5-minute take of him going through this scene like nonstop, and he's just
he can do this scene in 5 minutes every time. I mean, that's what's impressive. Like he doesn't lose the line. Like do you remember doing ADR with him with some of the conspiracy stuff? You'd be like, how are you gonna record 2 pages? You get it in 3. It really impressive because it's just you get variety of performances and stuff, but he's got the lines. It's the tone is there the whole time. They were able to play these scenes out 5 minutes every time.
And this set is so full of Easter eggs and it's so like when you walked in this set, it was like you really walked into Bernie's life. I mean, Tom is such a stickler for detail that if you opened up the fridge, there's literally food in the fridge. Did you ever see that? Like, I mean, like everything is real in there. Like all the files are real. If you and Tom does that. So if the actors at any point want to interact with stuff, they can, and they can incorporate it into the performance. And
I feel like we had been able to find Twinkies in Australia, and we'd put a whole bunch of them in the fridge. And Bernie had thought about, Brian had thought about using Twinkies in the scene, and you were like, "No, let's not. Let's leave them in the fridge."
Oh man, yeah, this used to actually have a little bit of a longer ending to this too. We ended up truncating it to just go directly from. Yeah, and I don't know if we'll put it in the deleted scenes, but there used to be another little element to this sequence too, where Bernie has this mood board behind where Rebecca is, and they had a brief interaction there, but it kind of gave a little bit of depth to sort of Bernie's conspiracy mindedness, but we cut it because it just slowed things down a little bit too much.
About this scene, just so everybody knows that we couldn't destroy the Colosseum. So anything that we destroy is pieces that we added on top of the actual structure.
Real quick, that's Christian Gonzalez did that little mural thing. So Godzilla's very careful when he's coming in and out of the Coliseum, and the piece that you actually see break in that
is
one
actually
shot,
added by visual effects, just so we're not breaking a real piece.
Exactly. I did that drawing. I always do Gia's drawings. That's my favorite thing is doing little kid drawings. So I remember I did that one on set. If you look at the last movie, there's a little dolphin in the last film, but the drawings that she did in the last film were much more kind of kiddie, and if you look at that one, I tried to do a little more psychedelic and abstract. She's getting older and she's getting tripped out, The image on the monitor of Godzilla swimming up until the very end, that was always that famous shot from Godzilla 2014 we used as temp in the movie of him swimming next to the aircraft carriers, and then so that's why it kind of has like the same angle and everything.
What's he doing up here? No idea.
So we're kind of bouncing around back and forth between sets from Daintree back to Brisbane here, and then back to where did we do this part right here? Because this was right next to Gold Coast, was it?
Exactly. This was an exterior set.
Yeah, this was one of those days where like it felt like we never had enough time to do anything because we kept trying to get a shot behind them towards Kong, and we just never got to it. But ultimately,
and then we ran out of light, and
yeah, exactly. So I should mention the song here is "I Gotcha" by Green Flow, and a lot of the songs in the film were kind of created by or were brought to me by my assistant Anna Cook. She created a big playlist early on, and this was one of the first ones on there. And we actually played this song on set quite a bit. And originally, Dan actually had a whole monologue here about his time in like South Africa, living with hyenas on the land and stuff. And ultimately, when we were on set and we started playing this song, and he was mouthing the words, "There's my cameo," it was like, well, just him singing "I Gotcha" in this song just says everything about his character that you need to know, and plus it's just so much more visual and exciting, and allowed the music to just kind of run the show here. So,
well, how nice is it to have two versions? You have a version of the whole scene with him singing it and the dialogue. Like you shot both versions. So it's like we could use the dialogue as we needed.
And ultimately, we went right to this version early on. So, I should mention this whole tooth thing too. This was kind of inspired by, I've always had really bad dental problems for years, and when I was doing this TV show called Outcast, I actually was grinding my teeth in my sleep, and I'd cracked my tooth, and I ended up literally my tooth broke in half in my sleep. It was like my worst nightmare come true. And so this is a little bit of catharsis for me, is being able to, relive that experience through Kong. And this was also one of my very first, ideas for the movie. Because, you're always looking for different things you can juxtapose on the monsters that are relatable on a human scale. And so the idea of doing impromptu dental surgery on a Titan was too irresistible to not do in this film.
I love this set, by the way, that again we built for real out on an island hours off the shore of Australia, which was crazy, but we pulled it off. And the other tricky thing is you'll see this gigantic yellow wall behind him, combined with the spaceship that Dan Stevens is piloting. We ended up using up all the yellow paint that was available in Queensland, and it was just a big debacle. We didn't quite make it, so the backside's not actually painted.
Well, and this whole set, this was part of one of our big ideas for the movie. Is I really wanted, to take the inspiration from my childhood of, the way it felt whenever you walked into the toy aisle at Toys R Us or Walmart, and there was just G.I. Joes, Thundercats, Transformers, all these really colorful, very neon, primary colored toys that just really jumped out at you. And the sensation that it gave you as a kid was just so insane. And I wanted to bring that sort of color palette inspiration to this film. But I wanted Tom to find a way to ground that. So if you look at these sets, they're all very worn in and lived in, and yet they still have this very over the top kind of color palette. This is also another real set where we just kind of threw a couple caution things on and some sparks, and it became ours.
And we ended up trying to ground, our main choices of yellow and black and red and white, really in that those are two color combinations in nature that are warnings, right? Don't touch when you think of bumblebees or poison arrow frogs, and that Monarch has gone on to use these color combinations as warning to the Titans to stay away from their facilities rather than trying to fight them or shoot them in any way.
See, this is why I love Tom, is because I'm like, hey, Tom, I want pretty colors. And then Tom's like, here's a justification for your pretty colors. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this the first time we were on this set, but Ben and I, the DP, always had this kind of funny thing where we kept trying to see how much actual camera equipment we could get away with showing in the scenes. So if you look at the very first sequence here on this base, on this set, whenever we're first introducing Hampton, behind her there's actually a camera crane fully in the shot that just blends into all this stuff.
Yeah, because who wants to be rich and get rid of all the monsters? I mean, that'd be terrible, right?
We better find the source before DC gets wind of this.
Okay. I'm giving you full operational oversight. Take a small team Mikhail, make it fast and don't let anyone die.
We'll be in and out of there before nightfall.
You feel like going for a ride?
So you never happens.
Attention all hands. Prepare heat 3, follow Earth launch in T-minus.
And by the way, Adam, you're sitting there with Ben at some.
Oh yeah, we're in that
remember?
shot, aren't we? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's impossible to spot you, but you were there.
Yeah, I think we might have even had the focus puller in a couple of these shots.
And this is this amazing concrete house that's in the middle of the jungle.
This is an Airbnb too, right?
Yeah,
you can actually Airbnb this place.
Yeah, go stay in it. But what we couldn't figure out, it's open to the elements. It was full of mosquitoes and bats and
huge spiders. I remember there was that one that was on the stairwell that every time.
And someone actually saw a crocodile. Remember, like
yep, there are crocodiles down below.
I just want to mention this track is by Jordan F. And it's kind of a funny story about how that track came about, because it's part of this fake soundtrack to The Guest Part 2. It's a soundtrack to a movie that doesn't exist, and we use it as a temp track just because I knew I wanted something cool and synthy there. And it ended up making it through the rest of the film because we just couldn't beat it. So funny enough, there's a Guest 2 track in this movie, and it probably works because he wrote that track with sort of me and my direction in mind, and it just happens to be that works on a Godzilla movie. We should talk about this set because
even I was gonna say that there's not much CG here. A little bit of extension is all like.
That's what's crazy. Tom really built these mules. Like there's the heave here. Like the heave in the background is from the last film, and the heave that they're standing next to and talking is 100% real.
And this is, again, part of a sewage treatment facility that then we built sort of shells over the top of. And the heave we built it for real, or as real as you can get. It's an inside-outside set, so you could walk all the way around and then inside to the cockpit in a single take.
And this actor, Alex Ferns, the Mikhail, the pilot, I saw him in the show Chernobyl, which he's very naked during a good portion of that, funny enough. But the second I saw him in Chernobyl, I was like, I got to work with that guy. He's so intense, and he's just had such a unique vibe. So we kind of wrote this part for him.
Let's do this.
Painted out the stuff in the sunglasses there. This used to be a little bit longer.
Well, this is a track you knew you were going to use from the beginning, too.
Which one?
This music track with them taking.
Oh, yeah. So this is another track that Anna Cook found for me. She like this one in the I Gotcha tracks. It was part of her first playlist that she made for me, and Anna's actually helped me out in movies like The Guest and Death Note. She's always kind of helped me find really cool tracks for the movies, and she's also my personal assistant.
I remember putting this together to get to you on set so you could show, because this was fun from like the second day.
Every straight on shot here of Brian and Dan, like specifically this one right here, they did a really cool rig where they're actually shooting into a mirror that's being vibrated at a high frequency, and the camera's also shaking, and it just makes it look completely insane. And what the mirror does too is the mirror has almost like a double image that when you're shaking it, that's even more than just it does a better job than if you just took the camera and shook it in front of the actors. It adds more of a high frequency vibration and almost like a double image. And then Alessandro takes that and does his thing. There's lots of little X-rays going on there. You can see their skulls.
If you blink, you miss them, but they're there, and it was a fun scene. And even shooting that scene, remember, that was on the gimbal, and we were playing back the pattern, and it felt like a roller coaster, right?
A lot of the screens in this movie are practical. A lot of the stuff is like where they're flying and things that's not, information.
And this is more Icelandic inspired environment with the colorful rocks in the background, which actually were that when I shot the plate, they weren't as colorful, but they tend to become like this in the summer months.
You know, it's interesting because that shot from their point of view of Kong running away from him. Remember, that was one where, and he's like skipping over that rock. That was one we actually redid towards the end because you wanted to slow him down because the scale from their perspective didn't look right.
Because the scale has been a big, player in this movie, right? We had to change the scale or the sense of scale based on what we were with. But in that shot in particular, it felt a little bit light and like me when I tried to jump over a fence. So yeah, I felt so bad because, when you final a shot and then going back, we didn't do that, like probably a couple of shots where we just saw it and said, maybe it should have been a little bit heavier.
When we see the heave later on in the film, one of the unique things, Adam really wanted to have it practically in all of these places.
We got picture.
Oh my God, it's a nuclear facility.
And we also dug the hole. I just want to clarify that Tom, when I wasn't expecting the hole done, and when we showed up on set, it was actually you dug like the gigantic footprints.
This sequence was something that was added a little bit later, and definitely give a lot of credit to Alex Garcia, who's sort of the hidden hand behind the monsterverse. And he originally, like, this was a little bit shorter, is a little bit more straightforward. Godzilla was just kind of siphoning stuff, and Alex was like, you guys got to have Godzilla like get attacked by some drones or something. And we're like, oh yeah, that'd be fun. And so the sequence kind of expanded out of that, and we kept getting it, kind of crazier and crazier until we got the whole nuclear pulse element, which fans really love.
It's Luma Picture did the work on this scene. They came in kind of late because we had added that extra shot late, and they did a great job. While all this work was, I just want to give credits to the different company. Was Skyline Visual Effects. They did a lot of the opening. The whole opening was them, and
so this next sequence here, where the destroyed base is, this is actually the same location that we shot in Godzilla versus Kong. Like, this is the same area where Rebecca Hall and Alexander Skarsgård had their sort of conversation about taking Kong with them on the mission. And so we went back here because we knew that we could build something in this place. And so this is most of this is entirely practical.
Everything here on the ground. We just announced add a little bit of pieces to the heap that they're missing those pointy elements, but otherwise.
But we originally were going to shoot this somewhere else, right, Tom? Like right up the road, but there was some flooding, right?
Exactly. There was a huge flood that had destroyed the set farther up the canyon. So we moved it down closer to the entrance. And then with the heave, what I was saying was one of the fun things is Adam wanted the heave practically in all of these locations where it appeared. So the heave weighs 9.5 tons. So we had two enormous cranes, and it breaks apart into 14 pieces. And we would crane it out to these remote locations and reassemble it in the middle of the jungle or the middle of a stream like you see there, so that the actors could actually come out of the real ship, which was brutal, but I think effective at the end.
And then everybody just assumes it's all CGI anyways. So.
Exactly.
Well, it was like the extension of the back wall. It wasn't easy because of all the trees. We had to really like cut out all the environment. And
originally this was one of the few things that I couldn't quite figure out how to do, but originally I wanted there to be a bit more of an investigation from Kong, like he finds little pieces of hair from the other apes, and I wanted to do something where he was kind of a quick sequence where he was sort of investigating around, and ultimately it didn't quite, it never translated, and so we kind of just went with the most simple.
Yeah, I remember we were like playing with the handprints and everything, but
and ultimately didn't need that much. It just needed a sound in the background, and we did a lot of work trying to show that Kong's cave was disheveled, that something had been in there and had messed with stuff, and
it was tricky because we never established it beforehand, right? So
ultimately you didn't, it just looked like nonsense. It was like you couldn't tell what was going on, so weirdly you kind of just get away with what we did. You can tell from his performance kind of sells it. He looks in there, from looking at him that something's not right, and that's kind of all it needed, which is kind of interesting because Kong is he's really leading the movie with his performance, and that was always something that was from the very first draft of the script. Even this is like pretty much the same from the first draft of the script. A lot of the main monster sequences.
And this scene is Weta. This is the first scene that we see in the movie that is made by Weta. This reveal of Suko took us a few iterations to get exactly what Adam you wanted, remember? Like the balance between how much shadow and how much of Suko, but
well, I knew I wanted it to have that kind of Spielbergian kind of vibe, like I wanted to be very stylized, but we had to find a way to him coming through the mist and making that feel realistic, while still having that stylized impact.
Yeah, and I think the performance of both of Kong and Suko are so like well done because the tricky thing about this scene is that you have the script pages where description, and then you have to convey all those description and emotion just with like body language. And particularly this fight scene was tricky to design because it's so hard to have like a 1 against 4, and it's.
And this ape, this guy right here, that we call him One Eye. And he was sort of initially inspired after there's that one character in Escape from New York with the big crazy hair, and he kind of hisses at Lee Van Cleef at the beginning. That was sort of the inspiration for him.
And Weta did the design of different version of One Eye, and then we settled with one that we liked, and then we want to talk about this.
Oh yeah, this was a little controversial early on, but Alessandro was, that was an idea that I don't think that was in the script. The idea of Suko.
I was really struggling to figure out what to do in this scene, and when we were doing the previews and what we're gonna do with Suko, and so when we were like designing the scene, I remember as a kid I was playing pillow fight with my sister, and next to me there was this giant teddy bear, and I said, oh, maybe I'm gonna use the teddy bear. So I grabbed the teddy bear from my leg and started beating my sister up. Actually, it hurt her a little bit because it was a giant teddy bear, but that was the inspiration for this moment with Suko. I'm so glad they stayed in the movie.
This is sort of a nod to the guest whenever Dan shoots Joel David Moore from a big distance. That was sort of where he came up with that. But the back to the swinging Suko around thing. What's funny about that is there were some leaks coming out online, and with these movies we do test screenings, and instantly all the leaks just appear and you can't do anything to stop it. But there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation with the leaks as well, and so people are always trying to guess what's real. And I remember one of the leaks, somebody said Kong uses Suko as a weapon and beats him with other apes. And I remember seeing all these comments online where they're like, okay, well, I would love for that to happen, but I know that this leak is not real because there's no way the monsterverse would ever do something like that. And I was like, yes, they're going to be very pleased when they see
that. I remember the very first screening that we did, that scene, like that play.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It was like...
it solidified it. I mean, that's the thing with these movies, right? I mean, we do a lot of test screenings because there's so many unknowns and there's so many big swings. You don't know, no pun intended, what's going to land. And that was one of those things where, when you hear the laughter in the audience, everybody's on board. You're like, okay, we got this. Next round, what do we got?
The plate just back there where the ship is going down the canyon in Iceland, that was a spot where we ended up with this crazy helicopter pilot Alessandro and I were scouting with. We were like, well, could we go down there? And he's like, nobody's ever crazy enough to let me do that, and just like
we
banks
went
the helicopter into that
I
canyon.
still have the iPhone video of that one. This is when then we went back, and it was fun.
I'll get as close as I can.
The hollow earth. A world untouched by mankind. Is this how Neil Armstrong felt when he stepped on alien soil?
So that absolutely enormous tree, a couple days before we go to shoot the scene, and the whole reason we're there is for that tree, it ends up being hit by lightning and collapsing around the set. It was hundreds and hundreds of years old.
So hundreds of years passed, and it waited to crack in half until the day before we started shooting. So, I was nervous about shooting this scene because I always hate fake-looking insects in movies, specifically fake mosquitoes. Anytime you see them, they don't look real. But I gotta say,
well, you know
you
what?
guys did a great job.
Well, a shout out to
looks
but,
awesome.
But also, like, your VFX editor on this, Adam Avery, he nailed this in dailies. Like, we had a good version of this pretty early. There was a few things in this movie where we really benefited from having really good early effects that just sort of like, oh, this is gonna work. I mean, it took a while to get to the final, but like that whole like, is this gonna play?
Well, even this tree thing, Adam Avery, because his job as a VFX editor, is he temps in his own VFX for us in the edit so that we have something that people can look at. And sometimes they're rudimentary, and sometimes he does such a good job. It's it allows the scene to really work.
I remember
really
posting
well.
for this for you like the day after you shot it, the tree, as a surprise, knowing he did such a good job, because you'd be like,
yeah, but did that also kind of put us in a corner, because what he did, which worked great, is 7 frames. And 7 frame works great as a 10, but then when you're trying to make it work, this scene coming up, I mean, 6 months maybe to nail the version. I mean, we did so many versions. It was just tricky, also because you couldn't, the way the scene was cut. If you were making that moment longer, it just wasn't working, right?
I want to give Alex Ferns credit. I think he actually improv the line about Ace Ventura, it always gets a huge laugh in the theaters.
So here we're actually up in the Daintree, which is this incredible palm forest where it's like you're on the other side of a lily pad, and when you look up, and it's the oldest rainforest on Earth.
Yeah, I remember like reading that. It was amazing.
Well, this rainforest is really trippy too, I have to say, because like when we first visited it, I would have these insanely vivid dreams, like really vivid. And right before we started shooting, I started getting these, and they're like lucid dreams. And I talked to other people, like Ben, the DP, he was having these weird dreams too. But like I had this dream where I was like, being marched to set with Brian Tyree Henry actually, and I fell over, and the tree root grabbed us by the neck and started strangling us, and I woke up screaming when I had this dream, and it really felt like that the forest had this like weird like thing, or it was, I mean, I know I sound crazy right now, but it's like there was a vibe out there. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. And I was not on drugs. This shot took forever. Didn't it?
The boiling water. Yes. But they're not great. I mean, those things that are.
A lot of this was sort of reconceived a little bit because the submarine stuff was supposed to be more about tracking, the shedding of his skin. And I think we needed to sort of develop Godzilla's journey in the movie to what he's doing, the mystery of it. And we had to kind of lean into some of these beats a little more. I got to say, Alessandro, you brought this company, Super Vixen, to the table, who I was really happy with because, we temp out something that's but what it's actually going to be, you're giving it to a graphics company. And a lot of this stuff is very close to the first pass of the style.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy with this company, Super Vixen. They are like in Australia. They help us out for all the graphic that we did, and
like the opening scene with the crack that's formed. I mean, some of the ideas we played off because the idea of the land forming around it and all that was sort of inspired by what they just naturally did and how we could sort of one up it.
These are really old, right? Like the trees here.
Yeah, they're a couple thousand years old, these palm trees. And we're still up in the jungle. We're literally shooting just a kilometer or two from where the road going north ends in Australia, and that's it.
This is the only time that we use fake feather, and we didn't really want to use them in that.
This is actually sound station.
Yeah, then we're back. So we added the feather in post because we didn't wanted to leave like feather in such an old forest.
I was so nervous about. I think because I had all these like nightmares where the forest was threatening me. I was like, we can't do the feathers out here. I was just. I feel like I would have died literally if.
This is one of the best set that Tom you've built. Honestly, it was amazing.
This set was super cool. Just construction, the sculpture. Yeah, the time-lapse video will come out of the construction of this set.
Well, there's so much detail here that you don't really get a chance to see in the film. Like they're walking past these elaborate little windows, and Tom spends 3 months on this set, and we film it in a day, and show it on screen for 30 seconds.
Yeah, we spent 9 months kind of building our own nursery of prehistoric plants that then we used to build out this set and a couple of the other sets in the movie. And then at the end, we trucked a lot of them up to Daintree to like fill in part of where we were shooting had been destroyed. So we restored it with the native plants back to where it needed to be and wanted to be. So hopefully that means no more bad dreams for you, Adam.
Yeah, let's hope so.
This is another little bug that was helpful for, like I said, we had a good temp early on.
This actually was a design for a different creature in the movie that I love that we didn't end up using. But I love the design so much that I decided to kind of write this into the film just so that we could use it.
Should mention our crazy, amazing special effects guy, Mike Menardis, who was able to figure out how to make this water work practically.
Of the water, yeah. And that was actually Kaylee's stand-in that Brian Galligan, was very proud of. He's the first AD, but he went to a hot dog or a hamburger place, and the girl behind the counter looked exactly like Kaylee, and she really did. She was like the best double I've ever seen. So she's in one shot.
So the way was kind of challenging, I guess, mostly because we really were like trying to create something organic because they define organic, and there's a story behind this veil, who built the veil, and you find out later. And we didn't want to do the usual like energy shield, and DNEG did the work, and I think they turned out very, very cool. I'm really happy where we took the
Well, yeah, because originally I wanted it to be much more of like a perfect mirror, but that just never was going to look right.
It was like, it's those things that when you think about it, it looks like, oh yeah, it's cool, but then when you're trying to do it, it doesn't work.
It feels, so I feel like it landed in a good place where it really does look like it's believable as camouflage and organic, kind of thing. It does have a reflective quality to it still.
And the reflection were, of course, like added in CG with like the digi-double of the actors. But this one is all practical. Like they were pulling that.
Well, yeah, we went through a whole lot of different material trying to find the right one that had the right texture. So what the actors are actually touching on set and pulling apart there
was insulation, right, Tom?
Yeah, like an organic cotton.
Yeah, organic cottons that we actually gave us a little bit of the fiber in the air as well, and we could lit it from the back.
Well, and it had a great amount of give. It was like that's the thing that people don't realize is just to have them interacting with something that appropriately pulls apart. It's like you have to do test after test of that. It's like you have to take time out of the day. Everybody gathers around, and the producers are there, and we're all looking at like, okay, does it tear correctly? All right.
And it wasn't blue because we want to avoid it, because also we want to backlight them a little bit, give them a little bit of like translucency, and it turned out very well. And
yeah, it was actually gray, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
One of the first scene that Weta worked on, actually was the first scene that they started working on the movie. We call it Suko's Travel, or Kong Travel, actually.
And these guys, you can recognize them from GVK, and even the little fight they had.
Yeah, we call the little little worm that they eat we call him grub. That and this one was also inspired by a lake that I saw in Iceland. The waterfall in the background as well is all like reference from Iceland, and Weta did a great job to rebuilding it. Maybe they used some of the place for texture, and you, Adam, was very excited about those super colorful oxidation rocks in the background here.
Totally. It's a place in Iceland called Landmannajar, which is way, way in the middle, and then we ended up, when we were scouting it, I think we landed, and then we got trapped there with the storm that came in, and we couldn't take off. So we were stuck, and we didn't know if we were going to have to spend the night on this crazy volcano in the middle of Iceland. And yet, later in the day, the storm cleared, and we were able to take off.
Yeah, and this scene is like another example where, find the right balance between the scale and make it looks like they're giant, but at the same time, living with them. Because if we were going to do the animation slow down at their scale, the movie would probably be three times longer, right?
Suko's performance here is just amazing.
That I remember, this was, I think, the second sequence we prevised.
Yeah, because it was the first one. So Scanlan was doing the opening, and Weta was doing this one.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how many kind of human mannerisms they give Suko, because we wanted it to be clear that he is trying to deceive Kong, and he's acting here. And so we went through a lot of different iterations of, him smiling bigger to himself and those kind of things. And then ultimately it's like Weta who really brings it. Once you're out of the previs phase, it's, in so much of these movies, you have to live with the previs for so long. It's kind of about these sequences surviving that, because it's so easy to misinterpret them, because they don't have all the attention to detail. But I just knew, even from doing GVK, it's like the second you get Weta on this, it's just, they really bring these characters to life, and they did such a good job with Suko and Kong, and their whole interaction here is just fantastic.
Yeah, especially here is
well, and it's like in this next sequence, I really like the subtleties they did with, if you look down below, there's all these little tiny birds that are flying around.
They're tiny birds, tiny trees, and little detail that you miss them, and they just add to the scene. That if you don't have them, probably you will miss them, even though you don't look at those
at the bottom frame.
Yeah.
You can see the little birds, tiny.
Yeah, they're little birds, and we have little they're flies, you can see even one here, next to the food, which probably they're human scale, birds.
One of the things though that was kind of cool about this movie early on is, like you said, the first sequence of the movie. This is the second previs sequence, but these are 4 or 5 minute sequences of no dialogue. And we how long we lived in each moment got debated and sort of finessed, but they held pretty much from before shooting of the concept of some of these scenes being 4 or 5 minutes.
As Adam said, Weta and Scanlan, they did a lot of they add a lot of their own, but I think that we gave them also a very solid blueprint. So there wasn't really much figuring out about what the shot was like. I think that the timing, the blocking, the camera angle were all set. They just went on and add more of their own for the performance, and and took over some of the.
So many people, even I see, even in the Dune advertising, they're talking about doing movies non-verbally right now. What's the ability to do a movie without any dialogue? And it's you see this, and this was sort of your original pitch to this movie back when we did GVK. One was, I'd love to do a movie that's just with the creatures, knowing that you weren't going to have them speak.
Well, having done GVK gave me the confidence going into this, knowing that these sequences can hold up, and like one of the very first conversations I had with Terry Rossio and Simon Barrett, who wrote the first draft of the script, and was, I remember talking to them on the phone, and I was like, look, we're doing a movie that's going to be mostly visually driven, and we're going to have large chunks of it, be dialogue free. And so that was sort of the main kind of drive from the beginning.
And that was the biggest challenges for us as well as in visual effects, because we were doing so much storytelling without words, as like a silent movie, as you said, Adam.
Get that out. A lot of these movies, you have a lot of storylines. Like in the last movie, you had two different groups of people, plus you had human bad guys, plus you had the creatures. This movie, you just have our heroes are sort of going on their journey, and then the Kong and Godzilla story. But the simplification of that sort of direction.
That was sort of the mantra at the script phase, is like, we're going to make this simple so that we can really live in these moments more. And yeah, the GVK, like, I always felt like it just there was just so much going on. There were so many characters, and yeah, I knew that I wanted it to really, be kind of brought down to a minimum,
Yeah, in some way, Adam was almost like working on two movies at once, right? With two storylines that intersect, but with their own specific tone as well.
We should mention in the ice sequence that, so often people think things are completely generated in visual effects, but we actually went to Greenland to shoot a bunch of that sequence.
There's a real effort on these movies, specifically these MonsterVerse movies, to go around the world and shoot these. I mean, how many different locations did you do Second Unit around the world?
7 countries.
That's so you feel it.
Yeah, for this one we did Australia, Iceland, Morocco, Gibraltar, Hawaii, Brazil, Spain, and Rome.
It's an entire evil civilization protected within Hollow Earth. Oh.
Here's another set that took
Yeah, this was a really impressive set to be on. The colors were very trippy, this was something too where it was so experimental. It's like, well, what does it look like for to put people up against a gigantic skyscraper size crystal that's glowing? There's a lot of questions when you're shooting this. Is this going to even come out looking right? And even the amount of light that you're bringing in, there was a lot of second guessing of, is this too dark? Is it, is this going to look right? And ultimately you just have to kind of,
just give it to me and then figure it out now. Good luck.
Alessandro will figure it out. Yeah, like, hey, like, that was a green screen on the day. Yeah, look at it now. It's a glowing crystal.
This was like very hard to pull off. I mean, those look of those pyramids and being like, illuminating and at the same time not being like, like UFO looking element. It took a while to nail the look.
I think it took almost like half a day just to tune in the lights properly. I remember just that the circulating pattern on the colors of the light, it just took forever to get the right pattern. And I think there was like even a technical issue where like they had it programmed and then something went wrong and they lost the program and then they had to redo it. And it was one of those days where you're just sitting around and you just you can always picture this imaginary money, counter going up as you're sitting there doing nothing, waiting for the set to go. And
I have to say, for us, was a very stressful set just because of the amount of like interactive lighting, blue screen, and whatnot. And if it was like challenging to shoot this scene anyway.
One thing that's worth mentioning coming up here is Adam Avery, the VFX editor. He also put together these dream sequence little tidbits, and it's the same stuff with Gia whenever she
he's able to add this warp to the eye so that it, like we would draw these out editorially, but some of these
are all shots from that's Kong. There were the other ones were shots from Godzilla versus Kong that we didn't use in the movie. So we're good at reusing footage. And you have to, even when you're doing a big movie like this, you have to be smart about how you're spending your money. This is a film we did with like 0 reshoots. And we had to
less than the other ones. Although this is the cheapest one in a good way, but we are using all of the material. I mean, it's for scale and scope. It was fun to be able to do that.
This was one of our few just like almost totally green screen sets. This was the epitome of let Alessandro figure it out kind of thing. Hey, they're inside of a huge glowing crystal. We'll see you in a couple months.
There's 2 monsters, like probably 6 or 7, but we got a very interesting look. It's kind of feel like a cathedral, I would say, right? That kind of goes along with the scene and what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. This was, something I was excited to see just on an aesthetic level when we were planning.
Yeah, right. The behind them was like with the colored glass. Remember that, Tom, you built for us with some interactive lighting. So it wasn't just blue. Actually, we tried to avoid the blue screen as much as we could.
We did a carved kind of fiberglass crystal going down the tunnel, and then we were able to. The practicals department were able to put interactive lights behind them.
This was inspired by Red Sonja. I was watching that movie during pre-production, and there's like a really cool kind of bone bridge sequence in that movie.
This is my favorite scene of the movie. I keep going back and forth with a few, but
I love how it bounces. That was something that I wasn't expecting. Because like even in the previs, they just kind of walk across it, and I remember seeing the first passes on that where Kong's weight bounces the bridge. It was like, oh, that's so great.
I gotta say, I love that this was practical. Like,
yeah,
this was not a hard scene to cut as far as
there are no visual effects whatsoever here. Well,
no, the liquid. I mean, but the way this lights up.
Absolutely. It's funny because these are the typical scene when I was there, I said, yeah, we are gonna have to do it all over again in CG, and we didn't touch anything of the light and the pouring liquid.
Well, can you talk about what that liquid is, Tom? Because we wanted something that it felt like when they poured the 2 liquids into the trough thing, that it would create a sort of chemical reaction and make them glow. And so you found.
So it's the chemical that's used in glow sticks. So one container contains the outside element of the glow stick, and the other container contains the chemical that's in the little glass element of the glow stick. And so practically when we poured them together and it overflows the basin, that allowed us to get it in camera.
Yeah, this panel CG, I just wanted to give kudos to Caroline.
This is the scene that sort of evolved as the movie evolved. So some of the information had to change, but that's all practical. Everything in that shot is pretty practical. It's just some of the detail shots had to evolve.
Well, this was the sequence that Josh and I, in an editorial way, spent the most time on, because we always knew that this was going to be the big expository sequence of the film, and figuring out how to dole that information out, like not just finding the right information, but to get the right amount of time that it takes place on the screen.
Greatest thing I learned on this movie was sort of like dealing with when information is valuable.
If you look closely in these shots in the top left, you can see a bunch of little baby Kongs playing, like right up there. Yeah, they're even kind of fighting. It looks like, Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I just think the challenge, I think, with the history room is just knowing when information is important to the audience. There's a lot of information that you need, but we haven't met the Scar King yet.
And we should say a bunch of this area of Hollow Earth is based on Adam You Love John Martin, the early English painter. His work and just sort of the depth and the craziness in the lava. He would do these religious paintings. People would.
Oh, wait, real quick. This character is one that we called Boots. Yeah. So and the reason is because the guy kicks him in the face.
Yes, but we kept him calling Boots, and we gave him a little special place in the movie as well at the end, right?
Exactly. So he's our reoccurring Titan. Oh, this gag right here was in the very first draft of the script that Terry Rossio wrote, and I remember it was specifically said, like it described an ape getting up in Kong's face and Kong punching him, and Terry literally even wrote in the script, this could be a funny moment. And it's funny because it's one of those that plays so well every time you screen the movie. It gets such a great reaction because it's just so badass of Kong to just knock that dude out like no problem. And also it was a bit inspired by that sequence in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as well, when Brad Pitt punches the dude out by the car, and we studied that sequence a lot in terms of how to make that work. This is the main event here. This is what I was most excited about as a director. By the way, I love that guard just kicks one eye there. That detail is just fantastic. Weta came up with this great pose.
The pose that I think they found a very they nailed his personality from the get go. Scar King.
Yeah, and and also I gotta give Tom Holkenberg credit that this score is awesome. Like his original.
This is some of the demo stuff you got even.
Yeah, he did this 25-minute long demo version of this track that was just unbelievable. He should release that because it's like the best music in the whole film. It's kind of funny. It's like there was a lot of debate, I think, early on about how tall to make Scar King versus Kong. And I like that he's a little shorter than Kong because ultimately Scar King's power isn't, brute force or just being, a bigger oppressor to Kong. It's, his agility, but it's also he's more of a dictator, that's where the danger of him comes in, is that he's a manipulator. And I kind of like that he doesn't stand over.
This is the only moment in this sequence that really sort of was added later.
Yeah, and I have to give a big credit to Mary Parent. When this part where he kicks the ape in the pit wasn't in there, and Mary's whole thing is like, look, Scar King's cool, but I don't hate him. She's like, you got to have him kill somebody in here. And I thought, oh man, I was a little afraid to do this initially because I didn't want to scar the kids. I was always thinking about, the younger audiences watching this film and, trying to skirt that line that we're not traumatizing anybody. But ultimately it needed that moment. It needed a little bit of brutality to drive the point home. And so I'm really glad that we did it. It's a really good little scene. You get a little bit more depth with Suko. And my only regret in this scene is that we didn't have apes carrying meat and stuff around to kind of get the vibe of how they feed each other and all that. Oh, and there was one little thing that we cut out of this early on, but we actually showed where all this war paint came from that the Scar King has on his fur and all the apes wear across their bodies. And the concept is that there's actually a ranking system within these apes when it comes to the red paint that they have, and there's supposed to be sort of like a crystal that kind of bleeds this red paint in this pit, and that's where they're getting it from. It's not blood or anything like that. But if you look the more guard apes, the one that are higher up in the totem pole, they tend to have red paint on their faces, and even the amount of slashes on their body kind of indicates their ranking. And One Eye, he doesn't have the paint on his face yet because he wants to be further up the totem pole.
Something that we didn't mention, but when we first meet Suko, he had the stripe as well on his chest, and when he goes into the lake, it goes away, goes washed out.
The ape behind him here on the right, I love this. I love this little nod he does at the very end of the shot, he's like, yeah. It's one of my favorite things. I love the bodyguard apes. They have such a good vibe.
Jared, by the way, did an amazing job with the ape in the initial whip. I was surprised it made it all the way through the sort of our nod to the dictator sash.
Oh, Jared Krichevsky? Yeah. Krichevsky, sorry, Jared. Jared is the lead creature designer for the film. I mean, he basically did Shimo, Scar King, the new version of Godzilla. We worked with him on the last movie. He created the final design for Mecha Godzilla, and he works for a company called Legacy Effects, which we love. And we requested to bring him on right out the gate on this one, and man, he really knocked it out the park.
We barely changed the design from his original one. We had to make some adjustment just for like locomotion, like Shimo's move, maybe where the hips here, where the big spikes. But starting with such a great design made from him, it was so good for us, And
it took us a long time to get Shimo right. It's how do you come up with the equal to Godzilla?
Yeah, I really like what Weta did for the atomic bread from the Shimo atomic bread. It's like ice version of it, and this moment here, this scene again for me, I'm very attached to this one just because it was long process, and there's so much going on, a lot of storytelling, the fight. I really love this scene.
Yeah, this sequence is to me like my favorite sequence of any movie I've ever been associated with. It's just I love the ambition of it, how long we go without cutting back to any dialogue, and it just so holds up. Like
I think it's about 5 or 6 minutes this scene, right?
Well, that's why when we were talking about the history, it became interesting because we never wanted to interrupt this scene, with any of the information. This history room used to be one scene, and in the process of developing the movie, it became a vignette. Like now, I think it's like 3 2-minute scenes or less, or it's 2.
Yeah, finding that sweet spot was very difficult.
It used to be 3, now it's 2. But yeah, and it wasn't that hard, and it sounded,
I mean, it looks easy when you watch it because you just see this information and it just kind of goes by. Like nobody ever complains about the scene, but you would just have no idea how many versions we did of this sequence. I feel like a third of our post was just re-editing the scene over and over again. And there's Mothra.
Yeah, it was sort of cool to see what you were able to do, Alessandro, with, because like I said, a lot of these were originally built, carved, real. Like that shot right there is fully real. We just needed details to clarify things. We didn't need a lot, but you were able to mock it up with. I mean, I think, Tom, you still made plates.
You gave us we asked Tom to redesign those panels, and then we had Avery, our VFX editor, to mock them up. And then Skyline figuring out the shot. This is it's a quick, we call it quick exit. Actually, every scene, of course, has a name. This shot, yes. And this was probably one of the more straightforward scenes to put together. Also easy because it's linear. They're just going from point A to point B. But at the same time, it's like turned out great, and it's like really feel like Kong is like in danger right now. And
well, it's like there's so many things that you kind of question early on that just don't seem to really matter in the grand scheme of things. I like all the different personalities going on there, but it's funny because in one scene, Kong is all the way back on the surface. Like he goes from Scar King's lair all the way here after like 2 minutes of cutting to the other humans, whereas it took him a third of the movie to get to Scar King's lair. But you kind of just go with it. And also, I think you kind of assume that maybe Suko took him a really long way because he was probably trying to kill him and probably trying to, taking him to that lake. That probably wasn't the fastest way to get to Scar King's lair. I'm justifying it now, but these are things that you think about that just ultimately, you test it, it just doesn't come up. It's not the issue. People are just going with the momentum of the film. And
especially if you think about it, now we're back up, right? But down. Next time we see them, we're again back down.
There was a lot of discussion on how gross to make this hand. We definitely did some versions that were way grosser.
The first version was a bit like, it was, we pushed back a little bit, but it's still disturbing the way it is now. And
just disturbing enough.
No, yeah.
So this is one of those plates that Tom was mentioning in Greenland right here. We just added the helicopter.
Yeah, I remember going through with Avery to all the Greenland footage, and we found this one.
He's absorbing everything.
You know, I made a deal with myself when I became a mother.
This was originally written as like some sort of like almost soccer type game in with the Iwis, and I just remember being like, I don't know how I can make these kids play some sort of weird Hollow Earth soccer thing. And so I, came up with the idea of them just running around with these ribbons, just because I knew if we shot it in slow motion, it would look cool. And
it does.
It looks like there's a logic to whatever they're doing. Really, they're just running back and forth between pillars, and I'm ruining the game. Yeah, actually, the rules of the game are I'm not going to pretend. There was a lot of going back and forth in terms of trying to show that those pillars were moving, because it's actually hard to tell, with like the camera angles, and that was one of those deceptively kind of tricky things of revealing that.
You shot all this stuff. Was this iPhone or was this with that camera? I feel like because you operated a lot of the
a lot of this footage like this, all the bad footage from Bernie's POV is usually me. Like we would shoot it on an iPhone, and then we would kind of sharpen the image, and it actually does a great job, because it just gives you that natural kind of, you can tell it's super like video-y, but it doesn't look like cheesy video.
It holds up too with the.
Also, it doesn't look like cheesy because we didn't do any extra treatment. Usually what you tend to do is always add like the annoying,
the record thing at the corner. I always hate that stuff.
The battery and the rack button, those kind of things.
Well, and the reason I don't do that is because I remember even as a kid, like probably like 12 years old or something, I remember seeing that in movies and then being like, my video camera never records any of that information, and you're kind of like, that it's fake even as a kid, and so it's just a cheap shortcut.
All right, so this shot coming up has been a nightmare. Not this one, the one that was the poor Skynet. They spent probably 6 months because there was so much to do to just find the space to put the veil and have Kong and Suko. I mean, you should see the plate because all the foreground is all real.
Well, there's a lot of debate on like how much to show that wheel directly interacting with pulling the veil apart, and
that's the location where everybody ended up discovering that leeches live in the rainforest.
Yeah, and we spent so many days on this cliff set. I was so sick of shooting on this cliff. Yes, with the actors. It was because there was actually, it was one of those sequences that was like overly written, and we always knew it was going to be about the length that it is, but it required us being up there for like, it felt like a whole week.
Well, you revisit this in this reel a couple times. That's the problem. It's like
and for the other thing about this scene is that now it just everything makes sense to us. But early on, when we're like developing and building the environment, figured out where we are exactly here in relation to the pyramid and where is Kong coming, and eventually, we built a map and everything made sense. But early on, I was very confused and I said, I don't know what we're gonna place this thing.
I gotta say, Haley, I never had any. She's so great as far as, because she's an on actress, and you don't know from that last film with her coming to this movie how she's gonna age, and it's just, you can hold on her, and the emotions in her face, and it's
she always goes with the most subtle performance, and sometimes you barely, like when you're shooting it, it's so subtle that you don't even really notice that she's giving you the moment you need, and it's always so tasteful. And so she always gave me like exactly what it needed to be, and nothing bigger, this I love this sequence here. Yeah, I love these shots. They really give you that kind of almost Thundercats 80s cartoon vibe.
So, Adam, we never talk about Pink Godzilla.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's
funny. I never asked you the question why it's pink. I just took it for granted. And
well, you know, I after Godzilla versus Kong, I knew I wanted to update Godzilla's appearance. It felt like it was time to give him a little bit of an upgrade, and you know, from the beginning, I wanted it to be motivated by the plot, and so that was the first important thing. Is like, if Godzilla's going to evolve in this film into something different, like, let's figure out how to put it in there. Like, you know, it's not just like, you know, one of those things where, oh, in this new movie he looks different just because we need to sell toys or whatever. Like, the motivation was like, you know, to give him a new look and but make it story driven, and honestly, pink is just like my favorite color. So when it came to coming up with this new kind of energy, you know, I felt like I hadn't really seen a kind of a neon pink Godzilla before. There's been so many iterations over the years, and I had no idea how you know, kind of controversial that would be with some people. And it's been interesting watching that unfold. I mean, I think people like it, but it's like, you know, it's a big deal. I mean, you go from blue to pink. Those are, you know, those are very contrasting, you know, color palettes. And
but you had a logic for it, you know, that he is shedding his skin in preparation for the battles with Shimo.
Well, and ultimately the energy that he takes from Tiamat is this kind of pink radiation energy. So basically right now, I don't know that Godzilla would always be pink after this movie.
Minor augmentations. Oh.
Wait, what kind of augmentation?
Making one of the strongest titans even stronger didn't go over so well, so we got shut down. Lucky for us, the prototype had already been transported to Hollow Earth for testing. It's stored in the armory at Outpost 1.
What's amazing to me is that, you know, in the editor's cut, this would probably be the thing that I was the most kind of concerned about, but it sort of fell into play. It really didn't evolve. I mean, it got, you know, more precise, but it was the backbone of it was pretty strong. I do love the Kiss song here. Really helped propel it as well.
One of the very first conversations I had with Alex Garcia, the producer, I remember I was driving through the park getting my coffee in the morning, and we were just discussing this film and, you know, all the sort of broad strokes of it. And one of the things that he said right out the gate is like, you got to give Kong some sort of like cool mechanical like appendage, some sort of like power glove or something. And I'm like, okay, if you guys are willing to let us go that crazy on this movie, we'll put it in there. And so that started from a small conversation that grew into this huge, crazy, iconic thing.
But we did a lot of wondering as to what it would really be. Like, what do they actually have in Hollow Earth that makes sense? And then our vehicle designer, Michael Myers, remember there was that one like aha moment. He comes racing in, and you and I are talking in your office, and he's like, you got to come look at this. And he'd taken the mule spaceship and broken it up like they'd taken spare parts and started to build this glove for Kong.
Exactly. So if you actually look at all the individual pieces of the power glove, the beast glove, they would actually make up a mule spaceship, like the little engines on the side, the top part of the mule. It's all in there.
Skyline took the design from Tom's and his team, and they enhanced it, can make it feel heavier and stronger. And I think this arm brace, or as they call it, the beast glove, it turned out great.
The glove, though, it just looks so good. Like, all the little intricate pieces are just incredible, and they all move in a valid way.
I think he loves it. Yeah.
Skarking.
can't tell.
This sequence was probably like the third most re-edited sequence in the film. Again, you wouldn't know it. It just kind of goes by quickly. It gives you the bare minimum information you need. There's not even that much ADR in it ultimately, but we spent a long time on this sequence. We shot a whole lot more, and there was a lot more kind of jokey stuff, and ultimately it was just the information you need to get across was just making sure you understood what Kong's mission was, and here we go. And I want to give big props to the VFX here.
This is the Morocco shoot for this stuff.
Yeah, and these were all shot spherically, and then we added a filter to make them all look
like the anamorphic
anamorphic.
lenses.
Love the camels.
There's a
Panicking.
camel here dying. There it is.
Yeah, he falls in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I didn't have a thing for camel, but I remember early on you were asking for camels for the
Well,
Morocco
when we
shoot.
went to Morocco, I wanted to shoot with camels, and then at the last minute they're like, well, first off, everybody's like, listen, you're gonna have to move camels out of your way. There's so many camels here. And then right when we got to Morocco, they're like, oh wait, actually we can't shoot with any camels for whatever, I don't remember the reason. And so I was very disappointed. So Alessandro made up for it.
Yeah, so I made up for Adam, and and
This is a real set here with these poor archaeologists.
Yeah, we shot that about, I think, maybe a dozen times. So all those stuntmen had to tumble down that thing about a dozen times.
And here, Ellie, here's you and me coming up in
we
Gibraltar.
were like in Gibraltar.
Yeah, these are the real plates are that first one with Godzilla, and then that's all fake.
Yeah, then this one shot that I think Tom, you're right. And I think you're out of this. I put Tom in here.
No, it was bottom
You were
right.
there, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yep, you're there, jump.
Yeah, well, I was behind. I wasn't in the shot, but
And me and Josh were just at Burbank.
Cutting this scene down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this actually was a little bit longer in the very first cut. There was a little bit more of a emphasis on the kind of ceremonial nature, like the reveal of G with the cape. There was, I would say, it was almost like a 2-minute sequence, and ultimately we just kind of truncated it to what it is. And it's nice looking footage though, with all the crowds there. They
this one also
cool.
turned out a nice shot that Dinek did with the top of the pyramid, and starting to feel like the anticipation of what we're gonna eventually discover. And this shot also,
I was so happy you were able to do that, because we weren't actually able to get the camera fully past her on the day, and you guys actually did it where it took over and it looks down, because I wanted to look straight down to show how high up she was, and I was so pleased that you were able to kind of finagle that into working. So here comes Mothra back into the movie, and this is very exciting. Like, I'm a big Mothra fan from the original Toho movies as a kid. I just loved Mothra's relationship with Godzilla. And so with our take on Mothra is, we started with the asset from King of Monsters, but we kind of changed the pattern to be even closer to the original Toho, and we emphasize a lot more of this gold coloring over the more of the blue tint. And I just want to say, this shot right here, I think this is like my top 3 shots of the whole movie VFX wise. Like this, the weight of Mothra just looks so real, like how heavy her wings look. Just being able to pull back and see that, I just got to say, like, well, that's one of the best shots of the movie.
When and that eye reflection shot, we were going to use that later when they're at the pyramids, but it was it wasn't really her moment at that point, so we were able to reconceive that here.
To the surface? No.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, we stole that and put it here.
that was a massive shot in visual effects because it's fully CG. We weren't allowed to shoot in Cairo, of course, and so Skyline did this one completely from scratch.
I know, we had this full-size Godzilla. We were going to go down the Nile, and they wouldn't let us do it. And so
I love the idea that the Nile is so shallow that when Godzilla goes up, you have these tidal waves flooding the city to either side.
Yeah, I really like this scene as well. This is like I'm sure that everybody got excited, or when they saw Kong and Godzilla fighting again.
Well, this sequence was inspired by my favorite movie, They Live. The thing I like about They Live is the best fight scene in the movie is between the two heroes. There's no villain in the big Roddy Piper, Keith David fight in the alleyway, and it's all over, a misunderstanding. And so that was the inspiration from the beginning, because Kong's really not trying to win. If you really look at his strategy here, it's interesting because right now he's just trying to, communicate something to Godzilla. Even now he's still in the defensive. He's not trying to fight back, and then at a certain point he's just like, nah. My friend Jason Eisner, who does Dark Side of the Ring, I just recently showed him this movie, and whenever Godzilla suplexes Kong, he stood out of his chair. He was so excited.
This moment where like Kong is beating up Godzilla was a little bit longer earlier on. Remember, Adam? Then we
Well, this is his revenge for GVK. He's trying to get Godzilla to just do something, but right here he kind of lost his temper, and so he got a little carried away. The thing I've realized is that Kong is an interesting character in terms of the way he fights, because he's very adaptable, but he tends to like almost lose the first time he fights somebody because he's learning, how it all works. In the other film, he learned about the battle axe. He learned about the powers that it had. And, even in this movie, like the way he fights the Scar King, it's like initially Scar King gets the upper hand because he's so fast, but ultimately, Kong adapts to it later on. And that's what makes him such a cool fighter, is that you really see that
as well here. Like,
well, and see, like in the last film, Godzilla won from crushing Kong down. That's sort of his like finisher move. But, Kong got lucky here because the ground in Egypt gives way and it's like sandy. And so the stomping isn't enough to crush him to death. So that's the reason why that move isn't as effective here as it was in the last movie.
And I love how you guys split the scene in half, where the dust starts coming up and the first half is clear and the second half you're almost in a dust storm.
Yeah, and I think I was initially inspired to do this sequence from some fan art that I saw online many years ago, where it was a shot of Godzilla and Kong by the pyramids, and I thought, oh my God, if I ever had a chance to do a sequel to GVK, I wanted to bring that imagery to life. And I think that Mothra would have killed G in real life just then. I think that when she...
And we talked about how cool it was, that the Sphinx is kind of the only Titan-sized animal statue mankind or the aliens have ever left on Earth. And so it was essential to use it.
Yeah, and you just always want to see the iconography of real locations juxtaposed with the Titans. That's always one of the most exciting things, places that and the scale of, and being able to see them next to it and be able to see them destroy it. And I like that Godzilla in that sequence, like he destroys one whole pyramid just by kind of stumbling into it, like it's not even like a big deal. It's like, it's like, oh, okay, thousands of years of antiquity out the window because Godzilla stumbled because he got some sand in his eye.
Because early on, Adam, you said the more real we can be, the more real places we can go, the more real the Titans would seem. So that's how we ended up, having to go all around the world to get the stuff together.
Sequence? Is this the last sequence Weta did? They didn't do that.
The last sequence they did, well, the very, very end one is their last one.
I remember seeing this for the first time, because this was in previous.
Yeah, but we delivered the very end before this one, because this scene was like saying that it was hard to design because of the zero-G aspect.
Well, and this was like another one of the main sequences in my first pitch to Legendary, is I was like, we're going to have a big zero gravity brawl, and this is the last time I'll mention it. This is Turn Me Loose by Loverboy, and this was like a late edition. Originally, this was just score here, and we decided to try finding a song, and so Anna again, she helped me find this music for this
That to
sequence.
say, Adam, when I remember when I came first time I met you on this project, I came into the office and you showed me all the boards on the war room, and there was the 0G fight there, and that
They look like they're dancing, by the way.
yeah, and that was actually what like kind of got me super excited about seeing all those artwork and doing that 0G fight, and it scares me a little bit about what I was gonna get myself into, but
well, yeah, because this is one of those things where it's easy for me as a director to say the monsters are going to fight in 0G, and then
yeah, that's like and then the 0G fight started. Okay,
well, and even just like
figure it out,
because at a certain point, you have to really know what the whole environment has to be built out, and and how many apes and what they're doing, and this whole sequence, it's totally insane.
And that iconic run, and it's like that was also on the board, remember?
Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite shots too. I know I keep mentioning that.
Yeah, this one was like it was a cheat that we just did it to give like this shot, this iconic moment with the backlight, because there was no crystal there; it was just placed there. To this one here is like
that's such a
yeah.
awesome.
This sequence is.
I know we're just going to end up watching this sequence like, and this in 3D is really amazing. And I have to give shout out to 3D. They did a great job on this movie.
Yeah, watching it in IMAX 3D is probably the best.
This is our big kind of Showa era Toho moment with Godzilla doing his thing. This was like one of this kind of series of shots right here. This was one that, like, I always pictured this being the end of the trailer, but ultimately they wanted to keep this sequence a surprise. But I always thought how cool it would have been to see them kind of launching at each other, and
yeah, it was so much going on here. Like everybody's fighting, then Matra coming in, and then the Godzilla and Shimo and Kong and Suko, and there's a reference later on one of my favorite movies. This shot also is like
yeah, the nice little nod.
The nod to Suko and.
So this idea was like, when Godzilla evolves, one of the many traits that he has is he's able to actually superheat his skin. Like one of the things he evolves towards is that he knows he's going to be battling Shimo. And so the idea is that he has these new abilities that can combat ice. And we originally had a little bit more usage of that throughout the Rio battle, but it kind of just ended up being that little moment there. But I do like that as a little hero nod. For whatever reason, every movie that I've worked on in the MonsterVerse has to have a Die Hard reference. In the last movie, it was Kong jumping off the boat with the beam behind him exploding, and in this one, it's Alan Rickman's death from.
It's this shot and like. This one, yes.
Well, it's funny. It's like this is actually the second time I've spoofed this Godzilla shot too, because I kind of did the same thing at the end of Death Note when Margaret Qualley falls to her death.
Até que enfim eu encontrei parceiro musical pra este sambinha infernal. E tá, mostro agora pra vocês o que foi que aconteceu. Foi aparecer.
Those are real plate shots too. A lot of the Rio ends up being CG, but those big aerials are always real.
Yeah, we actually spent like a good week in Rio shooting a lot of like second unit with extras and people running away in ground shot, which you know, there are a couple of things stayed, but
well, you guys got a good vacation to Rio.
We
were in Burbank.
Yeah. This like was a great shot. That it was great or not great. But and then of course the people this one here ducking under the tail. But then from this moment on, it was in Brisbane too.
Well, remember originally in between those shots, we'd actually shot like an aerobics instructor with like this whole.
That should go into the little scene.
Yeah, we didn't end up using it because when we did our first test screening, everybody's like, I don't understand the tone of the last sequence. It's like millions of people are dying, and then you guys just cut to like an aerobics instructor. It's like, okay, that's fair.
Like again, it's kind of here to build Rio from.
I love how Godzilla slams through that building. I love that, like, he just runs through it. Like, the quickest way to stop Shimo is just
it goes
run
through,
through
like
a
if it
building.
was like an house of cards. Like there's no. This moment also, it's awesome and.
Yeah, end up in the trailer button. And there's a little bit of Kong's electricity powers. You know, one thing I want to point out is that adding the electricity powers is sort of a homage to the Showa era film. You know, was something that kind of developed as we went with the Power Glove. And I don't think you actually see the electricity from the Power Glove at all in Egypt.
No, because we didn't.
Because we did Egypt first, and then we kind of figured out like,
we felt that power that came up later, and then we're already done with Egypt, and this is the supercharged Godzilla, which I think is super awesome.
Yeah, I like the way the energy's flooding out of his eyes.
Yeah, and there's a mix of the pink and the blue from the original one, and
I love this next shot here where it's like,
yeah, you wanted to go nuclear.
Well, I like that for just a second the movie it becomes Scar King's film for just a second, as you almost empathize with him running from the beam here. I remember we worked a lot on that shot there where Scar King gets hit by the beam, because it was kind of like how to make sure that didn't look like it would like totally kill him, Yeah. I like that Godzilla just tackles Shimo. It's like Shimo's just so big. It's like it's all Godzilla can do at a certain point is just like, just line back, tackle.
This tooth bite too, he made fun of him with the tooth.
I have to give credit to Richard Mirish. He's the post supervisor and producer on the film, and he like this one morning I came into the office and everybody was in Richard's office, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And I go in there and Richard excitedly is like pitching me. He's like, listen, everybody's favorite character is going to be Suko. He's like, you got to bring him into Rio, because originally this wasn't in there. And the whole idea of him coming up with the axe, Richard pitched that, and it made it all the way to the end. It's a great moment too. Yeah, his fins glowing there was a last minute addition. It used to always hit him when Godzilla hit him with his tail there, and then the very end we kind of added that extra glow.
I thought it was good to emphasize the impact. It's so funny, Adam, because someone on Reddit actually just pointed out one of those pieces, because they show that shot on a trailer,
TV spot.
And that guy came out and said that's the finger of Scar King, which is no, but and it's funny because everybody commented under him and said you're delusional, and but he actually got it right.
I like how Shimo and Suko's reaction here, because this is the first time they're actually seeing the sky, because they didn't pop out of Hollow Earth until the sky was already covered by Shimo's breath. So that's kind of a nice moment. It's the first time they're seeing the sun, and they've been, underground dwellers for so long. This scene is one that, it just always landed with test audiences. It didn't matter if it was a longer version of the scene, a shorter version of the scene, but every single time you get to the end of this sequence, there was always an audible "oh" in the crowd.
Rich, which we really haven't seen on these movies. Yeah, you're right. You get it, and you get it every time. So you're afraid you're not going to get it, but it's really a testament to Rebecca and Haley just, really being great together. Rebecca went out of her way to learn sign language and be able to interact with her and to really have a relationship with her.
Oh yeah, they really. I mean, a lot of the times on this film and the last one, I would sometimes give my direction to Kaylee through Rebecca because she can communicate directly. I don't actually, know fluent ASL. I can do a little bit, but she took it all the way. Yeah, this is the big moment right here. One thing we didn't talk about is when it comes to Scar King, is we really developed a lot of the look of his eyes, the kind of glowing
that was
eyes.
something. It was an afterthought that you wanted to do. Remember when we were doing the title reveal?
Yeah, I wanted a Scar King to kind of look like he'd really been, living underground for forever, and I wanted him to have that kind of ferocious kind of creepiness, and and so we did a lot of work trying to get that kind of cat glow in his eyes that took a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, it wasn't like because it's so easy then to go to cartoony but
this is an interesting moment because there's a really great scene with Dan Stevens and Bernie and Rebecca, and we had to the movie didn't really allow for it, and we were able to retrofit it to be this montage.
Yeah, this was almost a 3-minute sequence of everybody saying goodbye, and I really wanted the movie to end with everybody hugging it out, and so there was a little period where we knew that scene wasn't going to work in the film, but we were able to still get the hugs in there. So that was important. We just worked it into this montage.
Yeah, that was the very last scene. One last scene from Weta, and we brought back Boots.
I like that we got Kong riding Shimo in there. That was a kind of a later addition, the concept of that. And I like the idea that, in future films, Shimo can potentially be sort of almost like, Kong's horse going forward, Well, do you want to mention all these people here? We'll just go through everybody and what they did. No, I mean, it's really funny, like on these films when, there's just so many people involved in like the VFX departments. I mean, I'm sure that it's not even getting everybody,
Yeah, most likely there's going to be a few names missing because I think that there's like a limit of like the running time of the end credits. But yeah, it was a great project. 2 years of my life on this project, and I would do it all over again tomorrow, Adam.
For me, like you said, I mean, it's a couple years making these movies, and it started with pure chaos and it has not stopped, but here we are, and it's very gratifying. And like to me, like even as we were shooting the film, anybody who would ask me about it, I would always tell them, like, I felt like that this was the best movie I've ever directed, and I still feel that way, and that's not the way at least I feel on every film when I'm making it, because usually you're just filled with so much doubt and all the things that just the insecurities that go into making a major production of any kind. But this one, from the beginning, it just felt special. It felt like everything. It was a very difficult film. It's also probably the hardest movie I've made, but at the same time, it just felt like everybody did such a great job. Everything fell into place. It was so great. All you guys really contributed, so nicely. This second time I've worked with Josh, Tom and I have worked for a million years, and hopefully this is only the first of many with Alessandro. And, You know, and Alessandro, in a lot of ways, you know, like he doesn't get enough credit. I mean, he's almost like a you know, a co-director of this movie, you know, because so much of this film is animation, and so much of it's just pure animation, and so we worked so closely, and it was just you know, it all came together so well, and when it came to developing that
Yeah,
stuff, and it could have been
I never felt like a day of tension, especially between us, like as a team and as a core team, with our team and your team and with Josh. And I think that what also helped us make the movie that we made. There was no real conflict between us. Like usually there's always a little bit of that. And
you know,
it was
part of it's because I think of all these, of the ones I've been involved with, this movie sort of changed the least. You know, I mean, it changed in the details, but it didn't change. And, you know, even structurally, you know, we talked about the history, but minorly, like normal, any movie would have changed in that way. Like you said, there was no reshoots on this movie. The scale and the creature creation were sort of right there out of the gate.
Well, even the editor's cut was like 2:15, wasn't it? It's like really short editor's cut, because a lot of times those first editor's cuts tend to be closer to 3 hours, 2:45 for a lot of films. And Josh did a great job of, especially because we'd worked together and we just really had a good flow and a real trust. And so Josh's first pass was, you know, he was already weeding out so much stuff. And
we worked a little bit during that. You had seen maybe an hour of it while you were shooting and given some notes, but I think by the time you saw the movie, you knew enough. You had seen enough of it, and also, like you had said, some of the things that were going to fall out fell out. There was a few things that, you know, took a little bit more time, but I think just figuring out how long to be with people in the previs, how long those silent moments should be, and also just a lot of the details of, like, you know, the pink beam, and that's really where the work came. I think really figuring out that stuff, but not figuring out the story, not section. I think this is where the simplicity of characters helps, where we have a really defined story that we don't have to. It was really not, the pass offs weren't that hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, you know, for, you know, the way that we developed it with Tom, I think my favorite part of doing one of these films is when it's in the very first phase, when we're just doing like a lot of the concept art, because it's this moment of just like pure imagination, you know, and we're able to just, you know, you're able to explore so many crazy ideas. And
exactly. We try to set aside a big room and start from page 1 of the movie and work our way so that everybody who comes in can visually see the movie and see the arcs of all the characters and what happens with color and texture kind of in real time around the room. And I think it's just really helpful to ground everything and put it together.
A whisper challenge in an editorial is trying to keep the movie as cool as the pitch. Meaning, like, you walk into that room, like you're talking about, that war room with all the images on the wall. And, you know, like you said, a lot of the movie lives in previs for a long time, and the ideas are there, but like you're saying, the color, the detail, the cool moves, it's like it was all in that war room. It's like trying to get back to where you guys started the whole time.
all right, and so that's it. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.